Do you hear that?
Hear what? I was sipping water.
What, just that noise?
My water bottle?
You don't hear that? I just hear the overall natural ambiance in the room.
It sounds
Hey,
like
wait,
you're out of
what's
breath,
that?
man.
No, wait! No, I promise! Let me go! Oh, I'm gonna hit by some invisible force! I can't see! No! Let me go! Let me go!
Yeah, that shit was fucking intense.
What do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about. What's up, people? We're back. It's another midnight episode. We're a little bit tired. We're a little bit cranky. We're a little bit
Podcasting
crazy.
after midnight,
Hell
baby.
yeah. I'm Dom. That's Chris, the movie nerd, the TV nerd. We're back. It's Talkin TV, bitches. Let's go.
There's never been a better duo.
Seriously. Well, maybe Corey and Martin, but that's not to say anything to take away from us, because I would think that we're their spiritual successors, but that's
Yeah,
just
I think
me.
so.
Oh, man. Chris, we
Yeah.
got a doozy of an episode tonight. I'm just going to break you know me. I don't like to hide behind precautions, precursors, any of those P words that we like to use in order to preface things, in order to get into things.
fuck
Man.
those words.
We got a crazy episode tonight. Like, I don't want to call myself a prophet, because that includes a level of self-indulgence.
Yeah, dude.
That
I love you, but don't call yourself
no,
a prophet.
I won't. That's getting to a level of egotism that I don't even know if I'm capable of. But I don't want to say I knew that this movie was going to be awesome, but talk about a movie to at the very least go out on for a month that previously has been awesome, and this year was not awesome. Because as I've said previously, February has had at least one banger of a movie for the past 5 years, starting in 2014 with the Lego movie.
Mm-hmm.
In 2014, then you had Kingsman in 2015, then Deadpool in 2016,
Right.
then the Lego Batman movie in 2017. And then even though every single Disney hater will disagree with me on this, I still enjoyed Black Panther a lot.
It was fine.
I don't think that it's a perfect movie. I think it's a very good movie, and I'm shocked that even with all the race politicism involved, it kind of is a frozen situation for me, where I'm surprised that the movie was still as good as it was to me, even with everything that was going against it. And then this past February, I'm trying to think, what was the big thing with February in 2019? We got something.
Glass, dude.
That was January.
I know. I was just kidding. I had to just reference
man,
that
I just realized.
bullshit film.
Did we not have anything cool?
Just to
this
remind
past
people
February?
it was bullshit.
Oh, man.
We might not have, but you know what?
I
That
don't think we did. But
that doesn't matter. And if you
the
remember
point
it, bring it
being-
up later.
But
yeah.
the point being that I thought that this February, like I had a sort of a surprise last weekend with The Lodge. I'm like, in that, okay, this is a movie that like is good. I didn't hate it. I'm kind of shocked that I actually enjoyed it, parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
But, oh man, you know why? It's because 2020 was saving it. 2020 was saving its biggest banger for the last weekend of the month.
Wow, out of all those films you named previously,
Yeah.
you're going to go out and say that this is the biggest banger
No,
of February?
not out of any of the previous one. No, I wouldn't put this like
out of this February.
out of
You're
this
talking
February.
about the
Like
February
this
of
February,
2020.
it was
Okay.
been completely dead. I think you can agree with me on
Dude,
that.
hold on. You're going to say that this movie, you're not
Don't
going
you
to
dare.
consider
Don't
Fantasy
you dare.
Island
Shut
or
the
Birds
fuck
of
up.
Prey?
Shut the
I mean,
fuck up.
come
okay.
on, man.
Okay, you know what? Birds of Prey I'll give you, because Birds of Prey was a lot of fun. I like that a lot more, but I knew you were going to go with that fucking Fantasy Island. You were just going to make that a thing now. You're just going to torture me with these bullshit Blumhouse movies. First Black Christmas and now this. Seriously, what have I done to deserve this? Is it my fault just for suggesting it? Like, come on.
Dude, I mean, Black Christmas is a fine
Oh my
film.
God,
Go
shut
check
the
our
fuck up.
episode.
But-
Episode 13.
Oh my God. Wait, was that actually our 13th episode? That'd be
Yeah.
that's actually amazing if you remember
It-
that. Top
it-
of your
yeah,
head.
I didn't make that connection until now, but
Okay.
trust me, I've been sitting with these graphics long enough to know.
Okay,
that
that's
is
good.
episode 13.
That's good. But but
Imagine I'm wrong.
oh, that would be hilarious.
That'd be
But-
fucking awesome.
Oh man, Chris, what
Yeah.
movie are we talking about tonight?
We're talking about Invisible Man. Did you like that audio call?
Yeah,
back
oh my
there?
God, I'm so glad that you caught that. I'm so glad you did that on purpose. I'm like, oh, if you
Yeah.
did that on purpose, I'll be awesome. But if you did it accidentally, that'll be
No,
even
no, that
better.
was
That'll
that
be
was scripted.
Even better. So, kind of to give a little bit of a history and continue
please.
I hate to keep bringing this up, but why kind of this was inevitably always going to be a sequel to our Fantasy Island episode, because again,
Spiritual successor, I'd like to call it.
it really is a sequel, because again, it continues off of a common theme of what I pointed out when you asked me why it is that we keep going back to Blumhouse.
I
Because-
guess in regards to this, it
Again,
is a sequel.
specifically with this movie, because again, it's the same thing that I said on that episode, is for every piece of shit that they churn out, they churn out a movie like this. And I hope that's not too much of a giveaway as to what we thought about this movie. But all I'm going to say is this, is that for those of who have been following, Blumhouse's track record, I feel, stands for itself.
Yeah,
Again,
and sorry, but just to keep people around for the later half of this conversation, there are things about this film that I thought we need to discuss more on the lines of it didn't quite translate the way I think they wanted, or maybe I wasn't generally enthused by it. But overall, like, yes, I think like especially coming off of Fantasy Island, this was a very enjoyable and pretty solid movie. But just so people know, like, there were a few things that I think we'll get to that, you know, weren't the best.
Yes.
So
to kind of continue to build upon the origin before we actually get into the movie and start discussing it. So
Right.
as you guys hopefully will know, and if you don't remember, that's fine. I'll give you a quick history lesson, even though it was only 3 years ago now. Holy shit, it was 3 years ago. In 2017, Universal graced our presences with a little movie called The Mummy, starring Tom Cruise, and it was supposed to be kind of the kickoff for their cinematic universe, even though they didn't realize that they had already 2 gigantic money-making hits with Fast and Furious and Jurassic Park. So I don't know why they needed a cinematic universe, but that was
They
in the
didn't
day.
realize that?
Well, no, it was in the days where everyone was so busy trying to copy Marvel because it was the cool thing to do at the time.
they're trying to get that Krabby Patty formula.
Yeah,
man.
that they didn't realize that just how fucking stupid that actually was. And so they decided to launch the Dark Universe, where they were going to bring in all of the old Universal monsters and basically make their own version of that with the Avengers. You know, you had the big set photo, you had Tom Cruise, you had Sofia Boutella next to him, you had Russell Crowe on the far side, who had already appeared in the film as Jekyll and Hyde. Then you had Javier Bardem on the one side as Frankenstein, who was going to play Frankenstein's monster. You had Johnny Depp, who was supposed to play the Invisible Man. None of those films ever actually got made because The Mummy, of course, was a giant flop, and because they should have known when people were laughing at the fucking stupid Dark Universe logo when it came up before the movie even started, and people were already laughing at it.
That was just dumb.
And then the movie was already a piece of shit to begin with. But weirdly enough, I think that they did, I'm talking Universal now, not Blumhouse. Universal did quite possibly the smartest thing I think I've ever seen a big budget studio do, which is entrust the IP for one of their old Universal monsters that was supposed to be a part of the cinematic universe to somebody, not only a studio that, again, has been proven to have giant hit or misses on their hands, but also to a filmmaker that, again, has kind of been sneaking his way back into the pop culture reservoir with some very sneakily surprising films. And that filmmaker is Leigh Whannell. If you don't recognize that name, that's fine. He's the guy who co-wrote and co-starred in the first Saw, and he's had a hand in a number of different projects over the last couple of years, along with his close personal friend James Wan, who directed the first Saw, including, again, most of the Saw movies, Dead Silence, Insidious 2. But more recently, he broke onto the scene 2 years ago with a movie that nobody was expecting to be good. And quite frankly, again, was a movie that nobody really saw. And probably because it came out in the same year that Venom came out, it was the better version of Venom, which is Upgrade. And it was a movie, again, the confusing part was that the guy who starred in Upgrade looked exactly like Tom Hardy. So that was already a thing that movie had going against it. But that movie, I remember walking into that movie in 2018, and I remember walking out being completely blown away. Like, oh my God, this was a movie that I expected absolutely nothing from, and I got one of the biggest surprises that I got of that year. So that was the story about Upgrade. But again, only a few people, I feel like, within the movie scene actually saw it, and so they got the
real
full effect.
cinephiles,
Exactly. With this movie, however, again, so you take that, all of that fact, you cobble it together with the fact of, okay, people knew about, for the most part, about the failure of the Dark Universe. But they're familiar with those IPs. Those IPs
Listen,
are
let me tell
back
you,
on their hands.
I hadn't seen the Mummy movie. I could care less to see it. But the one thing I knew nothing about the film. I knew nothing about the plot. I didn't even know who was fucking cast in the film. The only thing I knew was that bullshit Dark Universe logo and just like Twitter, do your thing.
Yeah,
like that was it.
One of the few times
So-
where film Twitter actually did its
through.
job right.
Yeah,
for once.
sure. So please
With
continue. But
film
I just
Twitter,
needed to let you know, like, yes, you are right.
Yes.
People knew what the Dark
They
Universe was.
knew what it
even
was
if they
going to be,
didn't know
or what it
that
wasn't
trash
going to
film
be,
was.
or what it wasn't going to be before it even got started. But again, Universal, I give my hat to them with taking what was a doomed failure and turning it into this, trusting this filmmaker, trusting this studio to turn this IP and return it to its horror origins. Not only that, but take it and kind of spin it in a modern day 21st century way, working with Leigh Whannell, because the thing that made Upgrade so compelling was that it wasn't just another run-of-the-mill horror movie. It was kind of mixing traditional ideas and horror filmmaking techniques with modern day technology to create almost like this Black Mirror-esque thing. Like a criticism that I saw about Upgrade that I thought was accurate, I should say, was the fact that it felt like an extended Black Mirror episode. I thought there was a lot of truth to that. And while I wouldn't say that that's exactly the case with The Invisible Man, all of those factors together helped to generate and up the hype for this movie. That gets people in the door. But I was not at all expecting the quality that we got with this movie. So before we get into what we actually thought about the movie, so the quick basic summary is Elizabeth Moss from Mad Men fame, who has been on the rise and making her way into the horror Scream Queen.
I thought I knew her from somewhere.
Yep.
And what else has she been in, by the way?
She was just recently in Us. And that movie that I told you about last year to watch, Her Smell, which was terrific.
Oh, that's a horror? That's a horror film?
No, Her Smell is not. Her Smell is that's a punk rock biopic. That's
you just said like Scream Queen, but that's a punk rock biopic. I gotta check that out.
Well, she's making her way in because
who's it a punk rock biopic of?
It's a fictionalized character. That's the best part. It's not like an actual.
Cool. Fuck yeah.
I said biopic.
Sick.
It's not a biopic. It's a punk rock movie. It's framed around a fictionalized singer. And it fooled me to thinking that it was a biopic when it was better than like every single music biopic that we got in the last 2 years. But
why'd you use Scream Queen to describe her then? I'm just
because
curious.
this is the second movie that I've seen her in where she kind of fits into that part. I don't want to say, because the idea of a Scream Queen has never been something that's kind of has a dead set logo on it, similar to what we talked about.
Like Jamie Lee Curtis comes to mind.
Yeah, like Jamie Lee Curtis comes to mind, but I go all the way back to Fay Wray in the 30s with the original King Kong. You know, it's this idea again, Neve Campbell in the Scream movies. It's the kind of this ever-evolving trait that kind of applies to kind of every time you have a female lead in one of these like big, huge horror movies. You know, because as we talked about, horror is an idea and a genre that is constantly changing and evolving, and so the idea of the Scream Queen changes and evolves with that. And Elizabeth Moss is kind of stepping into the shoes and kind of representing the next step that the Scream
next
Queen
evolution,
is taking. Exactly.
Okay,
and so
fair enough.
Yeah, and so she plays this victim of domestic abuse. She's in this relationship with this partner.
Domestic abuse amongst many other things.
With this scientist who, again, you don't really know what he's doing. Again, the title kind of gives it away, and we'll get into that in a little bit, where the entire opening scene of this movie is her just escaping from this elaborate mansion in order to escape from this guy and escape from this abusive relationship. And then later on, after she has managed to escape, like a few weeks later, she discovers that her partner has mysteriously committed suicide, but that he's left her a decent sum of money. And throughout the next couple of weeks, as she's living with her sister, and I have to assume that's her sister's husband, even though it's never actually said in the movie, she finds a mysterious number of things happening to her that can only seem to be the work of her ex, who seems to be wanting to continue his quest, seemingly from beyond the grave.
Yeah, because I guess like the way they explain it is, and his brother, who's sort of like his spokesperson throughout this film, because we really don't see whatever his name was. I forget.
Adrian, I think is the character's name.
Adrian. Basically, he is so brilliant and so smart that throughout his life, he seemingly got everything he ever wanted, but the one thing he could not fully get was her, because she's also a very strong-willed, powerful character, and so that's why he was attracted to her.
Yes.
But that's ultimately why he wanted to conquer her like he conquered everything else. And we see, we'll get into the spoiler section a little later on, but we sort of see that dynamic and them trading blows, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually really glad that you brought that up, because that's one of many things that help cobble into the themes of this movie, because this movie... So to kind of break down, I guess, our general thoughts of it, this was a movie that probably was the first movie that I've seen so far this year. And I don't think that I'm exaggerating at all when I say this, where... So Uncut Gems was a movie that makes you feel like you're on the edge of having a heart attack throughout the entire thing. This movie was the equivalent of hypertension to me, where I literally felt so tense throughout that I didn't even realize that I wasn't breathing at certain points. That's how engrossing, and I'm dead serious. That's how engrossing and engaging this movie was.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you on this, because for as many flaws as I can point out about this film, like for example, who was that guy, James? I mean, what was their exact relationship? Like what was the sister and hers dynamic?
Yeah.
Like why was the sister so quick to rescue her that night when she called for that pickup, but then so quickly to just not even, just to discredit her off that email? And so there's a lot of things in this movie that you sort of like, if it wasn't as good, if the filmmaking wasn't as strong as it was, you'd be like, well, I want, okay, this is, you're losing me. But
Yeah.
the thing is, I was just sitting there, dude, and like my hand was in like this little fucking triangle shape, and I was like, okay, if I just point all my fingertips to each other, I have some grounding somewhere, because I am freaking the fuck out.
I do this.
You know
thing,
what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do this thing in horror movies where, again, I'll admit it right now. I'm a little, again, a big part of why I don't like horror movies is because, again, when horror movies actually do get scary, I'm a complete little bitch. But what I found is that, and again, this is just something I've noticed with the amount of horror movies that I've seen in theaters in the last couple of years, is that I can usually handle the jump scares or whatever they decide to throw at me if I block out the sound. Because I find that a majority of the actual scary feelings that I get during these types of movies.
The audio, right?
It's the audio. It's 100% the audio. Because the imagery,
always the fucking audio.
because if you're separating the two, the imagery is just imagery at the end of the day.
Okay, for an example, that dog bowl in the beginning of the fucking film.
Yes.
That wasn't.
Yeah,
I mean, if
just
you
the way-
take the audio out of that is not scary.
The way that this movie generates tension comes down so much to the audio, and I feel like you as an audio guy could appreciate this movie on so many different levels, because
Yeah.
we've separated. I'm the
Well, I
I'm
think
the
that's
video
why-
guy, you're the audio guy, and
because we're getting pretty ramped up for our Quiet Place episode, and a little, it's not too far off, and so that movie's been sort of coming back into our conversation, and so I think it kind of just made me realize, like, I think a big part of why I really like that film, I think probably way more than you, is for the achievement in audio, that
Right.
it really, and so with horror in general, like that they push the boundary, sort of like I was
Absolutely.
talking about on our episode where we were talking about sort of like, pushing the envelope, and like how video games industry is super important in like innovating and creating new tech that eventually gets adopted by like the military for certain things, or like like the major food industries. Like there's always like that one innovator that takes something for some niche purpose, pushes it. And so I always felt like horror was that for film, especially with sound. And in this movie, which was very interesting, and we've been seeing a lot of this more in recent years, like if you look at movies like Mother, or for example, even just like Stranger Things being like a horror series, the scores being less ambient and more John Carpenter-esque, where there's like tonal qualities and like melodies and rhythms you can get into that don't take away from it. This movie did that really well.
Yeah, definitely.
And the music ramped up the intensity. It wasn't like, because they were beautiful pieces. So me as a musician, I was like, I'm going to listen to this score and not be afraid. But right now, I'm fucking terrified. I can't even enjoy this amazing culmination of piano drenched in reverb and harp and all this shit, because it's beautifully haunting. And so, like, yeah, this movie, I think, pushed the technicals very far, in my opinion.
It's definitely one of those situations where you're right, kind of very similar to, I feel like, what Stranger Things was doing early on, which is kind of, and what made John Carpenter movies so well, which is where they don't want this kind of overpowering score that just makes it, it even goes back to me, what is the great, one of, if not my favorite horror movie of all time, The Thing, which is where the Ennio Morricone score of that is not in your face all the time, it's just a dun-dun. It's what made the Jaws theme so powerful.
And so
exactly.
you were thinking the same wavelength, because the reason I specifically picked like Stranger Things and I forgot what I was like.
You were just talking John Carpenter in general.
It's After Midnight. Yeah, Halloween. John Carpenter in general is because like there wasn't many varying musical pieces. Of course, you guys, you still had that ambience, like the drone tones and all that shit that just is kind of always there. But like the musical numbers that came back around, there was only like one or two that like for certain moments, like they had the theme of the Invisible Man himself and the theme of our hero when she was like sort of like, oh shit, something's about to go down. But it's the way they fucked with that theme and manipulated it. Like in Halloween, there's a bunch of different versions, or in Stranger Things, there's a bunch of different versions. And that makes it almost scarier, because it's like you're being trained to like get a certain feeling after a little while throughout the movie, like, oh shit, this music's here again. What is about to fucking happen? Yeah. And it makes it all the crazier.
I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because that actually again goes into something that I actually like, that a decent amount of horror movies and media properties have been doing recently, which is kind of incorporating the score and the overall ambiance of the sound into kind of not only training you to recognize the villain score, it's one of those things that goes all the way back to Star Wars, like, recognizing the villain score, but what they're doing so well now, and again, what I give something like A Quiet Place credit for, but more so something like this, is kind of incorporating those ambient noises into kind of like the tech motion, because a lot of music uses a lot of techno now in order to like kind of create this brand new sound almost. And I'm actually glad that you brought it up, because I got a question. You did not watch Blade Runner 2049 yet, have you?
I have not seen that yet, unfortunately.
So, but you enjoyed oh man, what was it? Yeah, no. So, but you enjoyed the It. Did you enjoy the music from It and It Chapter 2? I guess I should ask.
No.
Okay.
It didn't particularly wow me, but I'm willing to humor you. Where are you going
because
with this?
the reason where I'm going with this is because I just checked, and the guy who actually did the score for this movie, I didn't realize. I think there was a reason why we're giving this score so much credit. It's because it's Benjamin Wallfish, who is the guy who did the score for both of those It movies and Blade Runner 2049.
Well, one thing I can tell you is I listened to the Blade Runner 2049
Yeah.
score a couple times now.
Okay.
So I appreciate the music. In my music circles, that score permeated through. Let's put it that way, which doesn't happen often.
Well,
so that makes sense. Then
it was
this
one
was
of
a good
those
score.
situations where, honestly, again, you're the audio guy here, but again, my appreciation, I should say, for audio comes with how well a sound editor and a sound mixer can blend the audio. To me, the best types of scores, as much as I love the Williams scores that he does with everything to kind of accentuate those scenes with those great, with those overpowering scores, to me, the really powerful ones are the ones that don't tell you how to feel in the moment. It's the ones that just kind of accentuate and kind of are there without you even realizing that they're there. And then when you listen to them on your own, it's like, oh wow, like this scene would not work without it.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, and that to me is why I feel like this guy Benjamin Wallfish has had such an impact with the few amount of scores that he's done coming up. The other thing, obviously, that helps too with Blade Runner is he's working with one of the masters with Hans Zimmer, but also why I feel like sound,
that's why I listen to
kind
it.
of bringing our whole tangent back around is sound has such a huge part to do with this movie and with how effective it is, because like again the tones and the ambiance and how it works its way into each little moment with amping up the tension to certain moments where it'll just be silence and then something happens and you're like, holy fuck, did that just happen? And it's, oh my God.
To what you said about the sound sort of, how did you word that? You don't...
the tone and ambiance and how it works its way in until you don't even realize that it's there. So that you don't even realize that it's there. It's subtle in a way.
Yeah.
But then when you listen to the music on your own, it's like, holy, like this scene would not work without it.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. But I think, like, for me, though, like, I kind of was being trained, like I said, like, oh, cool, when I hear like that descending piano pattern, like some shit's about to happen to her. And it usually happened when she was alone in a room, and then you hear that score first, and a few seconds after something comes. But I was okay with that, and I loved when horror films do that trope, and that you see that a lot. And it's because I think, like, without that music there, what do you really have? You just have super quiet scene with her just standing in the middle of, like, let's use the padded room, for example, and just, like, maybe she'll get slammed against the wall and there'll be a big subby hit, but that will just come out of nowhere. So, like, I think the music sort of, like, is a way to, like, crescendo into, like, the big impacts. And I thought that movie did a really good job of, like, using that,
Absolutely.
And so I think it served like a double purpose, the film and this music. Like, it was like a hint, but it also was like a, please stop hinting because you're going to give me a heart attack with what you keep doing.
But
you know
again,
what I'm saying?
that's the movie's complete intention, because again, when those moments hit, they hit. And we're giving the sound a lot of credit. We're talking a lot about the sound. And just again, because sound plays such a gigantic part in the horror genre and why it is so effective, why it has been so effective. But again, I don't want to take anything away from the filmmaking here.
No, yeah. So like,
holy shit.
You did a really cool bit to start this podcast off that unfortunately we're a little far off from getting the cameras rolling. But the way you moved, I thought was pretty cool, because like this film could have easily have been super corny with like an invisible man punching and slamming and stabbing.
The funniest part is, I'm glad you brought that up, because there is actually a lot of times where that movie literally, like, I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, I understand that this is corny, like if you take away the sound, like this is like turns from a horror into a comedy right here.
Yeah,
but
it could have.
The scenes are so goddamn effective with how they've been built up that even in those more ridiculous moments where you can kind of just tell it's just Elizabeth Moss is like wriggling on the floor and she's not actually fighting anybody there, because also keep in mind this is Blumhouse and they don't have the budget to actually like coat somebody in a CG green screen and actually have them fighting them, but also again to kind of add to the effect of the movie, it's like, oh my God, like how the movie manages to mesh those two together and have it work.
And like, so like, like let's use Halloween again as an example of what I'm going to try and convey here. Mike Myers has a very specific walk. Like, you can imitate his walk. You do that walk, people will be like, oh shit, like that's like the Mike Myers like creepy approach. You have the arm up with the blade out. He's just approaching you and he's coming to fucking stab you, right? Like that's his gimmick. That's his shtick. And so like this movie does what most horror films do. And I think like this is kind of where horror films are made and broken. Is creatures have a unique look, like the supernatural stuff sometimes, and these kind of like intense, like more I guess like physically altercative driven like type of horror films, because you also have like other movies like alien movies, maybe there's not as much punching, like Signs. The action only comes really in the last scene. The whole build up is just like the mythos and learning the lore of that movie. But like for this film, you need the action all the time to make it intense and impactful, but it also needs to be like not just like, okay, like now just like put your hands to your gut and like breathe out, like acting school, like getting hit, because there's no one actually hitting them, you know? So like the performances just from the actors alone to like make it look so real when they were like, you know, because really it's like they're pretending to punch themselves, they're pretending to throw their bodies left, they're pretending to throw their bodies right. That could make or break this film. Sort of like how Mike Myers' walk could have easily have been laughable. And yeah, the audio underneath it certainly helps to intensify those moments, but like without it, I still would have thought it was a very believable performance and like just a very like cool, like that's why you did the bit, right? Because like it's in your head, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
it's that stuck in your head, and you leave this movie with that kind of fear in your head. But and again, it kind of goes back to what makes horror so compelling, which is it's not the things that you can see with the big flashy visuals and the giant jump scares. The fear and the reason why most jump scares and why jump scares used to be effective is because it's from what you don't see. It's from what you don't know. Fear of the unknown trumps any kind of fear there is in general. There is nothing scarier than being in a space where you don't necessarily know if there's anything there. And that is exactly the fear that this movie plays on. But as if that wasn't already enough, as if you were already on the edge of your seat because of that, this movie, obviously, if we're getting into kind of the subtextual and metaphorical layers that this movie is playing with, which is obviously the idea of being in an abusive relationship. Because, again, the whole driving crux of this movie is the fact of this woman is in fear for her life because she feels that even after his supposed death, she can't escape from her abusive ex. And what this movie does so brilliantly is it doesn't actually show you the abuse, which normally I would have a problem with, because again, a big thing that I've talked about again is relying on just telling you and not showing you. But what this movie does so well is it allows the atmosphere to tell the story for you. Because it's funny, because you mentioned, so kind of a little bit of a precursor, so we actually missed our first showing for this movie, and we ended up going to the second showing because you said, and very rightfully so, you said, look, the critics have been saying that the opening scene is the most essential thing, and I hate missing even if it's 10 minutes, I hate missing the opening season. I've done it a few times.
Just so everyone knows, when I say critics, it comes from like the two sources I read this morning, which was NPR and Double Toasted.
Hey,
but
whatever,
still, I mean, I go to them.
I'm glad that you write to Double Toasted, because my whole thing is that
I didn't watch it. I just like caught the first vibe. I wanted to get the vibe of the film. So, you know, like I'm not reading all the critical things, but like the two things that I had heard from both of those, like I like, they're both podcasts. I listened to like the first 5 minutes of each, and like instantly they both went to the opening sequence. So I was like, oh shit, this is going to be a movie you want to see the start of it.
Being that I am so glad that I listened to you, because, you know, we were dragging our feet. We were like, okay, we got an hour. We're knocking on the mall. We're trying to kill time, you know, whatever. We're trying to keep each other entertained, but it's like, fuck, let's get to this movie already.
Our Mall sucks.
And yeah, it does. It is falling quite far. We're not here to talk about Our Mall, but oh man, when this movie kicks into high gear, like before any of the action with the invisible nonsense has even started, you're kind of watching almost like this heist thing going on around this giant mansion, which again, I will point out, the one thing that kind of threw me off is the exact same mansion that they used in Upgrade. Like, I don't know if that's Lee Winnell's personal estate or if that's just the Blumhouse just that has that entire lot blocked off, but whatever the case, it looks awesome. And it just kind of generates the atmosphere, and you're right, the tone and feeling of the movie before you even get into the Invisible Man nonsense. It has the underlying sense of, okay, she is in fear for her life. She needs to get out. But with before we even get to it, and it's like it kind of builds up the threat, and finally, what I've been talking about for a while with showing, not telling, where you get the sense of fear from this guy before you even actually see him in action. And again, this is a character that who is, you are completely dependent on his aura to kind of generate the fear that you are getting from this movie, and it completely works.
Yeah, well, she builds him up just by her facial expression, just by the way she so tenderly moves his arm off of his waist while she's sleeping, the way that, you know, you quickly realize that, like, oh, if this woman makes the wrong sound, this is gonna get very intense. And dude, let me tell you, like, I'm so glad Not only because it's a pet peeve to just, I'm a completionist. And if I start something, if it's good, I want to finish it. And at least I want to give it a chance. And I feel like I can't do that, especially with the movie where you really only have typically 2 hours, I got to see the opening sequence. It's important. It's the first thing you see. It's your first impression. And some movies, you can get away with missing it and then you go back and watch it later. But I just don't think I would have gotten the full effect, because looking back on it and sort of dissecting that opening sequence now, it set the tone of the intensity of the film and of the pacing of the film and of the stakes of the film, but it honestly did a lot for the characters without saying a single word. And that's to me, I think that's kind of why people are kind of, at least in the small circles I travel in, are sort of raving about this opening sequence, because you can dissect about how much it did. And then it even painted how she, even in this moment of needing to escape, this moment of needing to get out, she wasn't going to leave the dog behind, because that is how much of a monster he is, that the dog should even have a chance to escape in that situation.
Because we all know in movies that nobody gives a fuck about humans. We watch slasher movie after slasher movie where humans get chopped to pieces. But if animals get involved, that's okay, this motherfucker's gotta go. That's how you know. That's the end-all be-all of, this guy is the devil incarnate, Before we see whatever shitty Australian actor Lee Winnell pointed out that can't do an American accent. But
now, can I just, to not sing its praises too much without, I don't want to come off unbiased, she did let the dog out, and then as she runs and the camera pans with us, she has to climb this crazy giant wall.
Yeah,
so the dog wasn't getting out.
Yeah,
but I mean,
obviously nitpicking aside, this movie does have its fair share of flaws. It's not a perfect movie, I would say.
No, but
it's very successful at achieving the atmosphere that it's going for, and it uses that to accentuate its story in the best, most tension-filled way possible. That is the thing that I have to differentiate. Do I think this is a perfect film? No. I actually think that, going forward again, this is a very fun movie to watch in theaters, and I think that it will be a great rewatch going forward. This is that movie that you just, again, get a bunch of friends together with to have an absolute blast with. It's a masterclass in sound design and score and building tension. But unfortunately, it is not a perfect movie, and I do have my fair share of problems with it. It's funny, I actually am glad that you brought up the physical performances thing, because again, whereas the physical performances in this movie absolutely work and help to sell the feeling of it, I have to say the lines were good too. I enjoyed a decent amount of the lines. But for some reason, and tell me if I'm completely wrong here, or if you felt the same way, I feel like the line delivery from a decent amount of the actors wasn't as successful as it should have been. And that sounds like a complete giant nitpick, but considering how much else this movie got right, it's like...
Right. And so I'm going to actually kind of tell you, no, I don't think it's a complete nitpick, because, so what I was struggling with, and I'm going to say something, then I got to ask you sort of to elaborate on it, right? So I was trying to decide because I felt like our main character was very well written, very well thought out. I really was probably only did she really say that once or twice? Because in a horror film, you're always going to have that, did she really just say that moment? Or did they really just do that? Because it's a horror film. There's always a level of campiness there, even if it's something that's like this, which is a little bit of a higher echelon. So I was trying to decide, is it the casting? Is it the characters? Is it just them, or was it the writing? I couldn't really decide, but the supporting cast with albeit with the exception of James, I thought he was pretty good, and I thought that his lines hit home. Everyone else though, there was
Aldous Hodge, the
the guy she was living with.
Okay.
Wow, we just didn't sound like two white guys there.
Nope, not at all. Right?
After midnight, baby.
We're not gonna say it.
And so with that being said, I just couldn't decide. I couldn't decide if it was the writing. I couldn't decide if it was just because maybe they were ad-libbing a little bit. I don't know. So what do you think? Because something felt wrong.
Yeah, definitely. I agree there. It's funny that you mentioned that, because it was a feeling that I felt with almost every single actor in this movie, where it's again, whenever they had to give the physical performances, that was where it was. That was when the movie was on. But whenever they had the line delivery, something felt off. Unless the moment was in super peril and the movie was on level 10 with the octane levels, how much tension and fear it's generating, in the quieter moments, it doesn't feel as compelling, and the actors feel almost weaker. And I'm wondering if that's because, Now, bear with me for a moment, again, because this is a crazy theory before I get into, like, specific, because I don't want to get into too specific casting, because, again, it's a problem that I really have with almost how every single major actor in this movie is directed. It comes off almost as Lucasian, if that makes any sense.
The School of George?
Kind of. And where I'm going with that is, again, what's the biggest problem that everybody has specifically with the direction of the actors in the Star Wars prequels?
You're asking the wrong guy.
They're directed
like the
too
prequels.
much like robots. Which is where the stories and the atmosphere, and again, two polar opposite examples, obviously, but again, because we've already talked ad nauseum about the Star Wars prequels, but what I go for here is when the movie is doing the fearful moments with the tension build up and everything, and you're following the actors in the physical performance, that's when the movie's at a 10.
Well, so what I think that, because the movie did something really smart. Like, this screenplay, you kept talking about the screenplay we were watching it, and so where I think the screenplay was really smart was that I think it realizes to a degree its strengths and its weaknesses, because they kind of like separate, they separate like their cleans from their dries. Like there's clearly like, there's like a dry load that you can take out and fold and bring upstairs, but then there's the dirty load that you have to put in the washing machine now. They never like layered them, they never mixed them together, which I thought probably would have diluted it, because I did have a problem with the dialogue. So I thought it was when push came to shove, there was just shoving and no stupid lines in between.
Yeah,
and
it's funny that you mentioned that, because the whole thing is that I don't hate the dialogue. Like, just reading the dialogue off the page, it's not awful. Like, it makes sense. Like, it doesn't read like something like a generic shitty studio biome where it's like, oh my god, this is so clearly like no people would ever actually talk like this. I buy the lines. It's the delivery of the lines that I'm a little bit confused by, because Elizabeth Moss, yeah, I get it. She's supposed to be terrified for her life, but there's something that feels off with the specific line delivery. And I get it. It sounds like I'm nitpicking the shit out of this thing. But again, it's like, I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job if it was like, oh, I'm singing the unholy, the holiest of holy praises, But it's funny that you mentioned that, because again, I can't help but wonder if that's part of Wendell's direction, and why I am choosing to say that it is a nitpick, because again, even with the delivery moments, when those moments hit, they hit. Because again, talking about a certain scene in a diner, or not a diner, in a restaurant, which easily to me is like the pinnacle. Like, that is literally the high point. Like, we talk about like the mountain with that tension map that we see. That is the ultimate high point, because we were even kind of making fun of how, oh wow, that scene feels really ad-libbed and it's really confusing, and like she's kind of being really shitty to that waiter, and they pull one over on us. And then again, I really don't want to spoil the scene, because it's the best fucking scene of the whole movie. But when you see that knife just floating there, and then it's one strike, everyone in that theater is gasping and being like, what the fuck? And
yeah, so like that's another reason why, if you can go and see this movie with an audience, because we were all freaking out. Yeah. You could just feel the air, the tension could be cut with a knife, as they like to say.
Pun intended. Pun very much intended.
Yeah, and so what I will say is, because you're right, it was like, it felt, it didn't translate, but maybe that was the intent, because like the dialogue up to that moment was so bad, but then when that moment hit, it was almost just like, what the fuck just happened? We were just here. We were just at 0, and now we're at 100.
You and I were both sitting next to each other. And we both looked at each other. That was our bro. What the fuck?
I said that out loud. I think. I was like,
I said that multiple times within that scene. I had my hand over my mouth. I almost felt like I couldn't breathe. Yeah, it was that well done.
Exactly. Yeah. It kicked the air out of my lungs. And so with that being said, I think like, you're saying like, am I just nitpicking? But like, this is a pretty emotive film. Like, this film got a rise out of us and everyone around us in the theater. Like, everyone was freaking out in this movie. Like, you could feel the energy. You heard the whispers, and the whispers were like, oh shit, no. Like, it was like what you want out of a horror movie audience. So I think like, we can be nitpicky in this film, because it was a pretty rock solid film.
The reason why you go to a theater, and again, it's something that it's whatever, and all of these fucking news outlets and everybody seems to be missing about it. And what these guys have been talking about, all of these directors, Spielberg, Scorsese, what they talk about with the theater experience dying is because there's no way to replicate that. Again, even streaming at its best, you can't replicate that feeling sitting in a dark room with a bunch of people, complete random strangers, all experiencing that same sense of elation. If it's a comedy, you're all laughing together if the jokes are good, you know? It's why bad comedy sucks so much, because when people are laughing at jokes that you know are fucking awful and that there's no thought into it, that are just made to appeal to the lowest common denominator, you know? But when they're great and you're all laughing together, and when it's a great action movie, you're all going, yeah, and cheering, you know? And when it's a sci-fi, you get enraptured in the spectacle, you know? And you're all kind of going on this adventure together. And this was the movie why I recommend, where if you get a chance, this is easily the first every single other movie to me you could skip watching in a theater. This is the first movie that I would heavily recommend watching in a theater with people, because the experience that you get from sitting with your peers and experiencing those moments without actually knowing what's about to happen, you can't replicate that at home. You just can't.
No, it's priceless. And so, like, to sort of like further paint in, just so people, because I understand where you're coming from, you know, would you enjoy your favorite stand-up special without the audience? Why do sitcoms like Friends or, you know, Seinfeld record with the studio audience? Because you want that rise, you want that real laugh track, because if real people are laughing along and enjoying it, you know it's going to translate on TV. It's just like, why do people go 10,000 people at Madison Square Garden 7 nights a week to go see their favorite entertainer? Because nothing beats enjoying what you love with other people around you. And so I think we sort of, you know, unless you have a final thing to say on that, I feel like we can move on, because I do have another topic I want to bring up.
Yeah, definitely.
So this movie did something that I am very thankful it did, although I really wanted the payoff for the first time ever of this trailer moment where they have the chair in the side of the room and he's sitting in the chair and you can see his body impressed into the chair.
Yeah, you see the outline of his body like folded against the chair.
But they just use that to bring you into the film, which I like that. I like when the trailer gives you different footage, but I wish we had gotten more of like when he steps on the rug and you can finally see his footprint. I wonder why that was cut, because that was so scary to me in the trailer, man, and I wanted that moment. I wanted to know how he got there.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that.
It's like a reverse Birds of Prey.
Yeah, kind of. It's funny that you mentioned that, because there were actually a few moments where, again, I don't like to give credit to the schmoes where credit is due, but Christian Harloff still, to me, brought up probably the number one, I think, biggest detriment to this that this movie has going for it. Even with we talked about the acting and the kind of the delivery and how the actors were directed, but which is where, to me, the only surprise, I should say, of this movie came with the payoff of the restaurant scene. Because literally, no joke, I think the only sequence in this movie that was not in the trailer was the sequence where she actually goes into the house and finds the suit, we should say, the kind of the key to his invisibility. Because Christian Harloff was 100% right, and as scary and tense as this movie was, I do still think it was a giant detriment where, again, this was unfortunately an example, and I have to say it because it's true, where they gave away a lot of stuff in this trailer. They gave away yeah.
Okay. I had only seen it.
Even with a decent amount, and don't get me wrong, they did it very well, and they structured it very well, and there were still plenty of twists and turns to keep you on your feet, but this trailer still, to me, was a gigantic detriment against this movie.
Damn, we usually joke around during the trailers, and I don't watch trailers on YouTube.
Yeah,
so for me, I was just like waiting for that one scene. But damn, okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I do have to say, but like, because specifically in the first, like, don't get me wrong, once this movie gets going, it gets going. And I'm like, the trailer's far from my mind. I am fucking tense and on the edge of my seat and about to have that heart attack that the rest of the audience is. But for the first third of this movie, I'm like, okay, I will admit, a lot of this the trailer already told me. I knew she was going to escape from the house in the beginning. I know that it starts off with him just fucking around with her. And again, the only thing that this movie I didn't know was, how they were going to do the invisibility. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a suit or if he actually did something where he experimented with his skin and everything, kind of like what happened with the translucent character from The Boys, or if it was going to be something like that.
Right.
But like so that was the unanswered question, and then I figured it was going to escalate to a point where it started to get to a level of like where he was not just fucking around with her in order to make her seem crazy. Like, that part was all well done, and the script, it was all very well written. But I do have to say again, that was a big point where one of the biggest problems that I have with trailers now is, again, trailers cannot seem to decide between whether they deliberately mismarket a movie to the point where it takes away from the enjoyment, or they just give everything away. And it's very rare that you get that one sweet spot of a trailer that kind of gives you the taste of what you want from the movie, sells the movie, and makes you want to go to see it without telling you anything. And it's just something that trailers nowadays just cannot seem to do.
Yeah, damn. So with that being said, I mean, that feels like a good spot to jump into like sort of our closing thoughts. And,
yeah, I mean, I have a few more things that I would like to say, most definitely, about it. But you continue.
No, I mean, I feel like, to me, I've touched everything I want to say. So if you have like a final, let's hear it. I mean, I'm down to keep talking about it.
I wanted to talk about the closing scene and kind of the kind of playing around with the idea.
You want to do that spoiler type shit?
No, not spoiler really, but kind of playing around with kind of this movie, to me at least, is going for a different kind of an ambiguous ending, because we have ambiguous endings where the movie just ends with kind of giving you that cliffhanger of asking the question of like, oh, did it end this way or did it end this way? And this movie is kind of trying to play around with that idea, I feel like, because obviously once the tension is resolved, they've killed the Invisible Man, they pulled the switcheroo where they revealed that, oh, it wasn't who you thought it was, right? Because the movie's kind of been hinting at it this entire time. I don't think it's as good a twist as the ending of Upgrade. That's the one thing I will say that Upgrade definitely has over this movie is, again, Upgrade, it's a little bit tighter, it's a little bit more focused, and I think it's got less actors in it, so it has less kind of people to focus on, which I can see where Winnell's strength is. Winnell's strength comes from directing these kinds of sequences, and he surprisingly blends kind of the thriller with the action very, very well, I would say, and with his twist endings. Like, literally, once you watch Upgrade, you'll understand what I'm talking about with the twist and how it's kind of almost Black Mirror-esque. But with this twist, he's kind of trying to play around with that a little bit, you know, where, again, when you reveals who is actually in the suit, because again, sorry, spoilers, but it's a suit. It's not who you think it is. You know, obviously, you know, you assume that the guy wasn't dead, and they made that very obvious, but they played around with that a lot. Then once the ending happens, where Elizabeth Moss goes, because again, what this movie does brilliantly is it stays focused on the theme of breaking away from the abuser, but it also asks a lot of questions with, you know, what actually can be done with getting away from abusers. And what I like about that is it's the first type of horror movie that manages to both kind of ask that question in an intelligent way and kind of give an answer for it while also still sticking to its horror guns. And that's a very, very tricky, very thin line to walk. Like, we're talking tightrope, thin line to walk that gets thinner and thinner the more you step into it, because we often talk about how the whole thing with horror is it can only seem to be lofty about the actual real world ideas that it touches on, because the minute that it seems to try and actually like give a statement and give a definitive answer, that's when it kind of starts to fall apart. But I think this movie actually takes a very interesting stance and does something very interesting with that.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you sort of combated my tired brain and went into that, because I do have a few more. Yeah, I do have a few. Hey, podcasting after midnight, guys. This is it's a journey in and of itself. And so with that being said, you know, yeah, I thought that the way that they dropped that social commentary, the message, the symbolism, it was pretty nuanced, and it was really nice. And you know, for me, I hate when my art gets political. You know, I go to the theater to unwind. You guys have heard me say this before, but this was, if we can get more of this, then I'm okay with learning about the way my creators feel, because this didn't feel forced. This almost makes me want to go and change my whole philosophy of separate the art from the artist. You know, meaning like what they tweet on Twitter shouldn't affect the way I feel about their song, their movie, their book, whatever, what have you, right? You know, because they're two different things at the end of the day. But this is like the gateway into like maybe realizing like there is a way to do it that doesn't alienate half of your audience, and that is sort of like respectful while you're still getting what you need to get off your chest out. And so, yeah, I gotta say, I'm with you on that. I thought it was well done.
And I actually wanted to kind of bounce off that point of this idea of everyone feeling that, you know, wanting to go to the movies to unwind, you know, and everything feeling so political. To me, some of the best movies ever made have been political. It's, again, we've talked about this, and this is a beating a dead horse at this point, but it's when movies start to feel a little bit too political and also become very unsubtle with their message, you know, like saying, again, obviously the difference being we can go to is something like Alien, you know, just for an easy example, something like Alien versus something like Captain Marvel, for lack of a better word. Again, polar opposites, but it's like Ripley comes off from those movies comes off as a strong female character because she's a strong female character, not because she's a female, but because she's just is a character that is stuck in this shitty situation and has to fight her way out, or else she will die, and just happens to be a female, you know? Like, you could easily stick a male in that part and it would work, you know?
Stick anyone there. It's just a matter of survival of the fittest.
Versus Captain Marvel and all this bullshit with Brie Larson saying, oh, Captain Marvel failed because too many critics are men. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know?
Right. You can't explain away why your movie was bad.
Exactly.
Sometimes, yeah.
But it's that sense. But like that goes back to the 50s and like a lot of horror movies in the 50s that were kind of emblematic of the Red Scare. You know, like politics have been, to me, again, it's one of those things to me that my professor said in school, and I don't necessarily agree with him 100%, but it had a lot of weight to it, which is where, to him, the best movies are the ones with a political message. And I wasn't sure about that entirely at first, because I'm like, yeah, but I've seen some movies with political messages in it too, and I've seen some movies without political messages in it, and I've seen some really fail hard, but then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, wait. Almost every movie that I like has a statement to make about something, you know, whether it's political or not. But to me, the best movies are the ones that say something. And this movie is definitely taking a stance because it makes clear from the forefront that taking all the Invisible Man stuff out of it, it is a movie about domestic abuse and relationships and toxic relationships and escaping from them. And it sees it through. It is that theme is on the forefront from minute one until the last minute of the movie. Like, you never lose track of that theme. And the fact that it plays around with it and also never makes you lose sight of the movie that you're watching, while also keeping it very underplayed, that to me is the sign of a great movie.
Yeah, no, well said. I agree. So with that being said, I think now is the time to roll into our conclusions.
Now I will give you your due end. I will put you out of everyone's. I will don my invisible suit and slowly. I don't know. I had a joke that I was going for that, and I kind of lost track. But yeah, this.
Hey man, it's. I mean, I'll keep mine quick. You know, I can just jump into it.
Closing thoughts.
Basically, I would be annoyed if any other film was like, hey, let's go and make a second one, because usually I think that it is half-assed at best, their reasoning for wanting to go and make another one just because it grossed well at the box office, and we don't know if it did yet, this movie. But the reason why I'm even saying that is because the way that they left this movie open at the end, that twist, the subtlety to that twist, I thought was a beautiful thing. And it doesn't come from her actions, it comes from their exchange, James and hers exchange, and that is the only reason why I would be interested in exploring this territory, because there's so much you can do with that. It doesn't feel like you're going to be grasping at straws. So, and I feel like this is the one movie I won't get that in. But, you know, if I have to give it a star rating now before I lob it over to Dom for his closing thoughts, I'm, you know what? Yeah, we just watched the film, and yeah, it's like a little bit fresh on my mind, and maybe this will change over time, but right now, my initial reaction with all that I can give you, because I only live in this moment that we have at this very space and time, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Nice. I thought it was a good watch.
Nice. And so you said so I'm assuming that buildup was there and that you wish you could get a sequel to this movie?
I feel like it's the one movie I won't get a sequel to that I feel is so justifiable if they choose to do that.
I'll do you one better. I don't want a sequel to this movie. I want this movie, I want Upgrade, and I want whatever other of these weird, crazy sci-fi movies that Lee Winnell's going to do. You know, put the Invisible Man or Invisible Woman in this case now. Spoilers, you'll see, with the Techno Man or whatever Logan Marshall Green is by the end. And I want to see Lee Winnell do more of these movies, because he has proven that kind of mixing these sci-fi and horror movies together is his forte. I want to see this fucking cinematic universe. Fuck that bullshit Marvel Dark Universe. This is the fucking, give me fucking the Lee Winnell cyber horror verse. Let's call it.
I like that. That's that way
shit.
Cooler.
Yeah. Fucking put the Invisible Woman up against fucking when Logan Marshall Green becomes that chip in his neck at the end of Upgrade. But make that like an Ultimate Fighter movie. I want to see that fucking shit. But yeah, kind of bouncing off of everything that you said. This was a terrific movie. This was a terrific theater-going experience. It's a lot of fun. You were on the edge of your seat this entire time. And yeah, we had our nitpicks. We had our gripes. It's not, to me, a perfect movie. It's not a great movie. But for having an absolute theater-going blast, for this being just, like, to me, like a perfect hype of filmmaking, of sound, of editing. This is everything that you want when you go to a movie. As I said, coming out of it, this was a film. And so that, I'm giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Yeah, that's right. I'm going that far. It may not stay the same for when I eventually write it and review it on Letterboxd, but goddamn it, I had a fucking blast watching this movie. And no, I'm not just saying it because I just had fun. This was a great goddamn movie.
Right. I mean, dude, well said. I almost wish I can go back and give it a 4 out of 5, but I think I'm gonna
give it a 4 out of 5.
I gave it a 4.
Yeah, I know. You said I wish I could give it a
4.5.
Yeah, okay.
Like you did. But I think that I kind of am learning a lot about myself. And I think that through doing this podcast, especially, I'm sort of like preemptively being able to see how things will marinate and resonate, even if it's like, just coming back from the theater. So I think 4 is going to hold true, and I'm not going to have any issues with that. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this show yet again. We really appreciate it. We want you to know that, and we hope you guys enjoyed Invisible Man as much as we did, because it was a ride.
And if you haven't seen it yet, go fucking watch it.
Yeah, and so speaking of like going and finding things and watching things and
segues
and just looking things up on the internet, Dom, why don't you do what you do best and inform these people of how they can keep up to date with all things Talkin TV?
Well, if you guys want to keep up with us, obviously you can find us on our Anchor page, which is, of course, a free distribution service that goes out to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, and a whole bunch of other places where you can listen to podcasts if you type in the words Talkin TV, no G, or Talkin TV podcast into any one of those services that I just listed off. You will see us. It's a big, shiny, neon-looking logo, lots of purples, lots of blues. We got like a ruffled, fizzy space background on it. It looks pretty cool. You really can't miss it. We try to make our logos as noticeable as possible because that's how you notice things on the internet. And Chris, why don't you tell them what our social media profiles are that will help direct you to those said places where you can listen to the podcast?
Oh, Dom, I thought you'd never ask. So with that being said, yeah, I mean, we're on social media. Cat's out of the bag, right? On Instagram, at Talkin TV, spelled TALKIN, no G. And on Facebook, spelled the same exact way as Instagram, Talkin TV Podcast. It's super simple, guys. And if you want to dive even deeper and get to know who we are, the people that are on the show, well, you can follow us on our personals. For me, it's at Christian Evanko. That's my first and last name. Don't wear it out. I make music in a band called The Stash. We're on all the major streaming services. You know the places, you know the culprits. Go find us there. I also have another podcast called Talkin with Andrew and Chris, which, to simply put, is a show about life, music, and everything in between. So if those seem like they're up your alley, come and join us. If not, thank you again for being here. And Dom, I'm sure you're on the internet too, right?
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under my internet name, which of course has been and always will be Movie Nerd Reviews, where I upload weekly videos where I just talk about whatever I feel like talking about with movies. I don't really do reviews on there anymore. I kind of just do batches of them, and I kind of just do whatever I want, because that's what you could do on the internet. Whatever you want, of course, within reason.
Of course, within reason. And so, with that being said, I think that you have a pretty good reason for what you're about to tell the people, and you've gotten into that on many episodes of this show, but even though you've explained this time and time again, just like you've done in this episode, I think you need to say it again. So, Dom, how do you want to leave the people here tonight?
Well, people, if there's one thing that I say, and I always believe it's definitely something that has been reinforced by this movie tonight, which is watch more fucking movies, people. We out.
Woo!